Level 1. Administrative Clerk. The folder lands on your desk at 6:11. No sender, no greeting. Just a black file with a red stripe across the top, delivered through a pneumatic tube that hisses once and goes silent. Your desk is still almost empty. Cheap monitor, locked drawer, gray keyboard, one badge clipped to your chest. Administrative Clerk, Level 1, Access. A supervisor stands behind you in a gray suit and says, "Log it. Do not read it." So you log it. That is your first lesson. Inside the Foundation, paper does not describe reality. Paper controls it. At Level 1, you are not powerful. You are not trusted with secrets. You are trusted with formatting, routing codes, timestamps, clearance stamps, personnel forms, shipment receipts, reports you cannot open but must send to the correct office before the correct minute. Room A14 sits on Sub-Level 1. 6 desks, no windows, 2 printers, 1 shredder that requires fingerprint confirmation before destroying a page. Everyone speaks quietly, like volume itself might violate policy. You process requests all day, cafeteria repairs, medical clearances, containment supply orders, personnel transfer updates. Some are ordinary, some are not. A request for industrial cleaning materials needs 2 armed escorts. A payroll correction arrives for a person whose employee profile no longer exists. A family contact form asks you to generate a message for a researcher who misses his daughter's birthday because he is on temporary field assignment. He is not. You know that because his name appears on a sealed incident list 5 minutes earlier. You do not ask. Questions make you visible. By your 3rd week, you understand the rhythm. White folders are routine. Yellow folders require supervisor approval. Black folders bypass normal departments. Red stripe folders make everyone stop typing for half a second. That half second teaches you hierarchy better than any training session. The Foundation runs on scientists, guards, containment chambers, and locked doors. But it survives because someone like you makes the outside world stay believable. At 1422, you process your first official disappearance. The form does not call it that. It says, external reassignment cover required. A junior technician, 29 years old, 1 apartment lease, 1 older sister listed as emergency contact, 1 unpaid dentist bill, 1 cat registered under her real name. Your task is simple. Generate a transfer letter to a private aerospace contractor in Colorado. Backdate it by 11 days. Flag all family communication for controlled response. Update payroll status to prevent suspicion. Your hand stops over the keyboard. Your supervisor asks, "Do you need clarification?" You say no. Then you type. That night you go home and stare at your own mailbox for too long. Bills, advertisements, normal paper, harmless paper. It all looks different now. Because you know the truth. A life can change because someone fills out the correct form. Level 2, Records Officer. Your badge turns blue after 90 days. No ceremony, no congratulations. Just a new access stripe, a new office, and a door that opens only after your thumbprint and voice confirmation. Records Officer. Now you are allowed to read the things you used to route. Not everything. Enough. At Level 2, you enter the archive layer of the Foundation. Incident reports, personnel status changes, sealed disciplinary reviews, containment summaries, family cover histories, disposal authorizations, memory treatment logs written in language clean enough to hide what they do to people. The records division is colder than your old office. Rows of black filing cabinets, secure terminals, document scanners that mark every page with invisible tracking ink, a wall clock that never ticks. You learn quickly that archives are more dangerous than chambers. A containment room can hold 1 anomaly. A record can reshape what everyone believes happened. Your first assigned case involves a closed incident from Site 41. Public record, electrical fire at a private research facility. Internal record, containment failure in a low-risk botanical object. 34 civilian witnesses. 11 police officers, 6 hospital staff. 1 local reporter who almost notices the timeline does not work. You review the final package. False news clips, insurance documents, hospital corrections, memory treatment approval, family contact scripts. The lie is not messy, it is beautiful. That frightens you more than chaos would. At Level 2, you begin seeing the Foundation's real talent. Not just containment, continuity. The world must wake up every morning and believe yesterday made sense. You become good at this. Too good. A senior archivist named Voss teaches you the hidden rules. Never leave a contradiction in two connected files. Never change a date without checking payroll. Never erase a person completely if their absence creates more questions than their fake transfer. Never write dead when unavailable. Buys you time. You start speaking in that language, unavailable, reassigned, medically isolated, administratively removed. The words do not soften the truth. They make it easier to carry. At 2318, you find a name you recognize in a restricted personnel appendix. A guard who jokes with you in the cafeteria last month. He disappears from the roster after a red sector incident. Public cover says security contract terminated. Internal note says exposure symptoms continue under observation. You sit alone in the archive room, reading the same line 3 times. Then you close the file. That is the second transformation. At level 1, you obey because you are afraid. At level 2, you obey because you understand. Level 3, Department Coordinator. The first test schedule you approve begins at 8 o'clock. By 8:07, 2 guards are late, 1 researcher is furious, medical requests a delay, security refuses, and a containment engineer tells you the chamber door has not passed final diagnostics. Everyone wants you to move the test. Nobody wants responsibility for the delay. Welcome to Level 3. Department Coordinator. Now you control time. Not in a supernatural way, in a worse way. You manage access windows, personnel movement, test schedules, clearance approvals, transport routes, observation room assignments, and emergency hold orders. You decide who is where, when, and under whose authority. At first, it feels administrative. Then you realize proximity is power. A scientist near the wrong object at the wrong minute becomes a casualty report. A guard assigned to the wrong corridor becomes a missing person file. A technician cleared for 1 extra door sees something that changes how the next 10 years of their life are handled. You do not touch the anomalies. You place people near them. That is enough. Your calendar has 5 colors. Green for routine, yellow for restricted, black for compartmented, red for containment sensitive, white for events you can see only after approval from above. You learn who answers to whom. Research pushes for access. Security pushes for control. Medical pushes for caution. Ethics pushes for review. Administration pushes for continuity. Everyone claims the system works because their department is essential. You know the truth. The system works because someone keeps them from colliding too early. At 1640, a senior researcher pressures you to approve an additional test slot for SCP-8842. He says the window is rare. Data may degrade. Opportunity may not return for weeks. Security says the response team is understaffed. Medical says the test subject shows stress markers. Ethics has not signed final review. The researcher lowers his voice and says, "You want to be useful, don't you?" There it is, the real currency, usefulness. You approve a reduced test with half duration, doubled security, and mandatory medical presence. Everyone is unhappy. Nobody can overrule you without exposing their own risk. That is your first taste of administrative leverage. It feels clean. It is not. The test produces valuable data. It also causes one assistant to lose 30 minutes of memory and spend the next week refusing to enter elevators. Your schedule makes both outcomes possible. At level 3, you stop thinking of yourself as support. You become a gate. People begin watching your decisions. They send polite emails. They choose words carefully. They ask for favors with professional smiles. You start enjoying the quiet fear behind the politeness. That is when the Foundation has more of you than you think. Level 4, Deputy Site Administrator. The Site Administrator calls you at 4:27. Not your manager, not records, not operations. The Site Administrator. "Come to Command Conference 2, she says. "Bring continuity packages 4 through 9. Then the line cuts. At level 4, you become Deputy Site Administrator. You are no longer managing schedules inside the machine. You help decide how the machine reacts when it breaks. Command Conference 2 is underground, windowless, and too bright. 7 people sit around the table. Research, security, medical, engineering, ethics, external affairs, administration. 1 chair at the head is empty. The site administrator is still in Sector C. Sector C is sealed. Nobody says what that means. A breach has triggered a partial lockdown. 2 labs offline. 16 staff unaccounted for. Local emergency services are already asking why power flickers across the industrial park above the site. The security chief wants full isolation. Research wants time to preserve data. Medical wants casualty access. External affairs wants a public story in 11 minutes. Everyone turns to you. Because if the outside world panics, containment becomes only half the problem. You activate Continuity Package 6. Chemical leak cover story, traffic diversion, fake utility failure, employee family contact delay, emergency payroll continuity, media exclusion zone under Hazardous Materials Authority. By 5:12, the world outside has an explanation. Not the truth, an explanation. That is what you provide now. At level 4, your decisions become visible to directors, but invisible to everyone else. You prepare the options. You frame the risks. You decide which facts rise to the top and which ones stay buried in appendices. No one has time to read during crisis. Power hides inside presentation. A site administrator rarely asks, "What is true?" They ask, "What can we survive?" You learn to answer that. 1 week later, the official internal report crosses your desk. The breach is contained. Losses are categorized. Families receive approved messages. The public story holds. Your continuity response receives commendation. 16 people remain unaccounted for. You feel the weight of that number for 3 days. On the 4th, another incident arrives. You work faster. That is not healing. That is adaptation. Level 5, Site Director. The office is larger than you expect. That is the first disappointment. You think becoming Site Director will feel like a rival. Instead, it feels like stepping into the center of a room where every wall is already listening. 1 screen shows live sector status. 1 screen shows staff movement. 1 screen shows containment stability. 4 secure phones sit on the desk. Each connects to a different authority that can ruin your day without raising its voice. Your badge opens almost every door on site. For 1 hour, that feels like freedom. Then the first red alert reaches your desk. At level 5, you are no longer close to power. You are power with a human face. Research wants permission. Security wants authority. Medical wants discretion. Ethics wants restraint. Administration wants clarity. Regional command wants results. The staff wants confidence, even when confidence is theater. You give them theater because panic spreads faster than truth. At 13:12, an anomaly transport fails near the West Access Tunnel. 2 guards injured, 1 object unstable, 1 civilian delivery driver exposed. Local traffic cameras catch 18 seconds of impossible footage before the feed cuts. You approve lockdown. You approve memory treatment. You approve deletion of public footage. You approve a false structural collapse report. You deny a researcher's request to delay sedation for data collection. He calls you short-sighted. You suspend his project access for 48 hours. Not because you are angry, because crisis is not a debate club. This rank teaches you the real shape of command. Every decision costs someone something. If you protect the object, people suffer. If you protect people, containment weakens. If you protect the public story, families receive lies. If you reveal too much, the world outside starts pulling at threads it cannot survive unraveling. You used to judge directors for sounding cold. Now you understand. Warmth is expensive during emergency. You sleep in 90-minute blocks on the couch behind your office. You keep spare clothes in the bottom drawer. You learn which department heads exaggerate, which ones minimize, and which ones are dangerous because they believe their own reports. The site becomes your body. Alarms feel like pain. Budget failures feel like illness. Staff misconduct feels like infection. You do not run the site anymore. You defend its ability to continue. And in return, It takes the last ordinary parts of your life. Level 6, Regional Director. The regional map covers the whole wall. 7 active sites, 3 provisional facilities, 12 front companies, 41 high-risk personnel transfers, 6 government relationships requiring maintenance, 2 anomalies in transit undercover stories so fragile, 1 wrong traffic camera can collapse them. At level 6, you are Regional Director. You no longer belong to one site. You belong to the network. Site directors brief you with controlled fear. Legal teams root through you. External affairs requests approval for cross-border narratives. Security asks which response units get priority. Research asks which projects survive budget cuts. Medical asks how many staff can be moved before the receiving facility breaks. Power becomes wider, colder, less personal. You make decisions with maps now. That is dangerous. A person on a map becomes a staffing number. A town becomes an exposure zone. A facility becomes a risk cluster. A family becomes a continuity concern. The language scales upward until pain becomes readable and therefore easier to approve. A crisis hits 2 sites in the same quarter. Site 14 needs reinforced sublevel doors after pressure failures in a red sector wing. Site 72 needs medical isolation upgrades after repeated personnel degradation incidents. Both are necessary. Only one can be completed before winter. You fund Site 14. 6 weeks later, Site 72 suffers a containment failure lasting 11 minutes. No public exposure. 9 staff removed from active duty. 3 departments destabilized for months. The review says resource constraints contribute indirectly. Indirectly. That word follows you. At level 6, your guilt becomes statistical. You no longer see most consequences directly. They arrive as charts, projections, sanitized casualty lines, retention rates, exposure estimates, and budget revisions. You learn to read tragedy in spreadsheet form. That changes you in a way no breach can. You also begin negotiating with governments that never officially acknowledge your existence. A minister receives a partial truth. A police agency receives false jurisdiction. A hospital network receives emergency funding under public health language. You sign a $9.6 million tunnel contract, listed publicly as flood prevention. It is not flood prevention. You barely notice the lie after signing. That is what scares you. Not that you lie, that you do it smoothly. Level 7, 05 Liaison. The first message from the Council contains only 7 words. Attend, listen, record nothing, speak when asked. The room has no windows, no visible cameras, and 13 empty chairs. Only 4 are occupied. None of them use names. At Level 7, you are 05 Liaison. You are not the top. That distinction matters. You stand close enough to feel the gravity of the people above you, but not close enough to mistake yourself for one of them. Your job is to translate their will into language site directors, regional directors, and departments can obey. You become the voice between worlds. Below you, people think the Council is mythic, distant, almost unreal. Above you, the Council discusses sites, cities, directors, projects, and governments with the same controlled tone you once used for routing folders. That is the final illusion. Breaking. There is no sacred room where decisions become pure, only higher rooms where consequences become larger. At 240, you present a regional continuity proposal involving 3 sites, 2 cover governments, 1 collapsed containment doctrine, and a recommendation to erase an entire archive category from mid-level access. The Council asks 6 questions. No one raises their voice, no one reacts emotionally. Then one member says, "How many personnel remember the original classification?" You answer, 216. Silence. You understand what the question really means. Not how many know, how many must be managed. The recommendation passes with modifications. By morning, departments receive new terminology. Old files move behind sealed compartments. Staff memories become subject to review. One director protests and is transferred within 48 hours to an advisory post with no operational control. You do not sign the order, you deliver it. That distinction used to comfort you. It no longer does. As 05 Liaison, your power is indirect and enormous. You can end a project by how you summarize it. You can save a site by framing its failure as strategic difficulty instead of incompetence. You can bury a director by placing one doubt in the right briefing. People below you stop speaking honestly. People above you never begin. You live between fear and silence, and somehow, this is still not the top. Level 8, O5 Council Member. The vote takes less than 1 minute. That is the part nobody below would believe. No dramatic speech, no raised voices, no ritual, just a secure chamber. 13 seats, 1 empty place, now assigned to you, and a proposal that determines what millions of people are allowed to remember. At level 8, you are O5 Council Member. You do not manage a site. You do not manage a region. You manage permission. Permission for truth to exist. Permission for lies to replace it. Permission for cities to receive false disasters. Governments to receive partial briefings. Scientists to lose discoveries. Families to receive stories. And entire branches of knowledge to vanish from everyone below your level. The power is almost silent. That is what makes it unbearable. A file appears before you at 5:03. Global continuity risk, multiple sites, cross-cultural exposure, projected civilian instability if disclosure exceeds 12%. Options: contained through layered misinformation, partial government coordination, selective memory treatment, archival erasure, controlled sacrifice of one public narrative. The old you would search for the clean answer. Now you know clean answers are for people with partial access. Every option stains something. The only question is whether the stain spreads. You vote for containment. The motion passes. Somewhere below, regional directors receive instructions. Site directors prepare implementation. Deputy administrators draft cover stories. Department coordinators adjust schedules. Records officers revise archives. Administrative clerks log files they are not allowed to read. The machine moves. Your will becomes paperwork before anyone sees your face. That is ultimate power inside the Foundation. Not command, distance. Nobody really knows you now. Not your family, not old colleagues, not even the people who sit beside you, because every council member is a locked room wearing a human shape. Trust becomes procedural. Friendship becomes impossible. Regret becomes private maintenance. You think sometimes about the first folder, room A14, cheap monitor, gray keyboard. Your supervisor saying, log it, do not read it. You thought the test was obedience. It was. But it was also a measurement. How much distance can you place between your hand and the consequence? How many forms can you sign before a life becomes a line item? How many truths can you bury before silence feels like duty? At 6:11, somewhere far below, a new administrative clerk sits at an empty desk. The pneumatic tube hisses. A black folder lands in the tray with a red stripe across the top. They stare at it too long. A supervisor behind them says, log it, do not read it. They obey. They think they are handling paperwork. You know better. The Foundation does not rise on monsters. It rises on people who learn to file them correctly.